But the foreign elements, the foreign fighters, weren't only with Jabhat al-Nusra or with the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham, they also fought with some groups that identified themselves as Free Syrian Army. So they've been there for a while. But with the fall of territory, Syrian territory around the Turkish border, with the fall of those areas to the opposition, then obviously that helped facilitate the entry of more foreign fighters into the country. It became easier for them to get in. The men I know from the beginning, the ones who are still alive, of course, who first took up arms, many of them are disillusioned. They feel like they're caught between the regime on one side and the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham on the other. Some of them are sitting out this period of the fight because they feel that it's quote-unquote too dirty, in the sense that these radical Islamist elements seem to be very dominant in some areas. So there's a real sense of disillusionment. The sense of abandonment, which was always there, has deepened. Resentment for the situation now, the feeling that nobody helped them, and that's why northern Syria in particular is in the state that it's in.
And so, I mean, one question that I sort of struggle with is the issue of moral clarity in Syria. I was traveling the other day and I overheard someone saying randomly, you know, I can't believe in Syria the extent to which people will go to fight each other. There's just these radical extremists that are killing each other, and this is sort of the dominant narrative through which people who don't know Syria well are concluding the situation. And so, you know, but that can't be the end of the story, and I'm wondering if you can help us sort of find that moral clarity in Syria in the context of such a chaotic situation. I mean, is it with the civilians that are caught between the fighting forces? Is it with the fighting forces, but certain types of fighting forces, the moderate elements? Is it just taking a stand against the regime? I mean, where is it that we can say we have moral clarity on what's right and what's wrong in Syria?
Well, that's not for me to say. I'll just tell you what I saw, but I won't tell you what's right or wrong. That's for you to make up your own minds. I'm just going to tell you what I saw.
Maybe some examples or stories of moments when you sort of were compelled by the situation, and
well, I mean, you know,
as complicated as it is.
Yeah, it's complicated. I'm a journalist. I'm just reporting what I see. I'm not, you know, taking sides. I'm not going to say what's right and what's wrong, but I can say that there are millions and millions of Syrian civilians who are suffering. There are areas in Syria that have been without electricity for more than a year, that have water shortages. This in a country that is water rich, mainly because with the electricity being cut off, it's harder to pump water out, and basic infrastructure like this. It's very, very difficult for a lot of people. Inflation is rampant. Many have been out of work, obviously, for years. The randomness of shelling is terrifying. It is terrifying to feel so passive when you're just simply sitting in your home and you just don't know. It's sheer luck whether or not a artillery or a rocket or something is going to land on your home. It's a terrifying experience, and it's one that millions of Syrian families face every day.
And the artillery fire is coming from the regime.
It's coming from the regime, yes. It's you know, there are warplanes, there are helicopters that are disgorging barrel bombs, which are improvised explosives devices that are full of bits of metal and what have you, things like that. On the other side, of course, the rebels also have weapons. They have anti-aircraft guns of various calibers. They're making their own. They're getting supplies smuggled in from neighboring countries, and there are, of course, certain governments that are backing various elements.
And so talk a little bit about your interaction with the civilians. You know, as a journalist that goes into Syria, as I understand the situation, you can't go in unescorted. You have to go in under armed
I don't
protection.
know. Well, I don't know about
Or
armed.
under the regime, with a regime visa, which means that you're then minded and
Yeah,
limited.
well, I can't go in on a regime visa because I've been blacklisted since about 3 months into the uprising, so that area is sadly blocked to me, and I can't report on that. I wish that I could. It depends also who you are. You know, I look a certain way. I speak the language, so I can obviously pass, and I travel alone, in the sense that I don't use fixers, translators, security, anything like that. And I can't do my work basically without the extreme generosity of Syrians who help me. They welcome me, you know, they open their homes to me, they open their bases, they help me get from A to B, and my work would not be possible without that generosity. And I thank and acknowledge that very deeply. But you know, it's. I think it depends on who you are. You know, if I were blonde and male and 6'4", I think I'd have a very different experience of reporting in Syria than I do. You know, I can physically blend in as much or as little as I want to, and that's a spectrum that I move across depending on where I am, who I'm with, security situation in any particular area. And it differs from place to place. In some places, on my last trip in, for example, it was in late August, and sadly I've been out of Syria now since then, which is my longest period ever outside of the country. And I went into those areas with Jabhat al-Nusra and some Salafi Ahrar al-Sham men, because I felt that I needed that level of protection, I guess is the word, but it's more a case of if I'm with them, then other groups will know, you know, that I'm with them. I'm referring, of course, to the kidnapping of journalists and aid workers and what have you in Syria. It's an unprecedented amount, according to the various press watchdogs. I think the figure is 40-something in the span of 2.5 years, which is an incredible figure if you think about it. Many of those who are picked up simply disappear. We don't hear who has them. There's no ransom demand or anything like that. So that's what I meant when I said that in certain areas I would have to go in with somebody like that. And oddly enough, the Jabhat al-Nusra men who were there with me told me, listen, you know, if the Islamic State of Iraq and Sham comes for you, even we can't do anything for you. So that's just an indication of some of the, it's an indication of the interaction actually between these groups in some areas. It's a very complicated picture.
And so you've been around the men, the scary men with beards.
Scary is relative.
But there is a lot of the perception is in the U.S. and in the West that these are fighters that are enemies of the free world, if you will. But I think you're telling a more complicated story, that in part they're caught up in a game that, you know, is perhaps not one of their own making. But what are the dimensions of these different fighters, and do they talk about what and if Syria still means something to them as a place, as a country? What are they fighting for?
Well, there are, you know, I said before that Islamism is a spectrum, so there are a wide variety of views. In the beginning, when we started seeing these battalions, these katibas being formed, many of them adopted names, Islamic names. They were either names of historical figures or important battles in Islamic history. They did that for a number of reasons. Some of them did it because they were trying to attract the funding of donors in the Gulf sheikhs, the guys with the big pockets and the massive fundraising abilities. Others did it because they were true believers, because they were either, you know, Salafi Islamists or other types of Islamists. There were others who also did it almost like a Sunni identifier, to identify that, to mark them as Sunnis. You know, in Arabic we say that everything that is forbidden is desired. So even something like wearing a beard was an act of defiance against a regime that viewed an outward manifestation of religiosity, like a beard, as a sign, if you like, of a potential Islamist and therefore a potential threat. So even having a beard was like an act of defiance. So you have to view it like that. But you know, as time went on, people's attitudes changed. I remember talking to a fighter in Ma'arit and Amman, which is a city in Idlib province, and I think he put it to me best. He said, listen, he was with the Salafi Ahrar al-Sham brigades at the time. He said, listen, we weren't always like this. I didn't have this Islamist ideology. But he said, with time, our feeling that the only thing that could get us out of this was God. You know, they used to chant, God, you are the only one who is with us. And with time, many of them really came to believe that. And, you know, there's also the old saying that there are no atheists in foxholes. That also plays a part. These are people who are under constant danger. It's a very dangerous environment. And, you know, in dangerous environments, people can often turn to religion. And you can see a growing religiosity. And with time, that religiosity can become radicalized. And that is a sentiment that can be reinforced, if you like, when the only assistance that these people got was the guys with the long beards and the short pants. Other foreign fighters, other Islamists, and when they came in, so you know, that idea was also reinforced. I was telling you earlier that I know men who participated in protests initially. I know one guy who then went on to do relief work. After a while, he felt that wasn't getting him anywhere. He picked up a gun